Darfur is a region in western Sudan. It was firstly named Daju when the Daju, who migrated from Meroe 350 AD, were ruling. Then renamed Dartunjur when the Tunjur were ruling the country and who had been replaced by the recent immigrants from Darfur in the Central Africa. Darfur was an independent sultanate for several hundred years, incorporated into Sudan by Anglo-Egyptian forces in 1916. The region is divided into 5 federal states: Central Darfur, East Darfur, North Darfur, South Darfur and West Darfur. Because of the war in Darfur between Sudanese government forces and the indigenous population, the region has been in a state of humanitarian emergency since 2003. Geography: Darfur covers an area of 493,180 square kilometers, approximately the size of Spain. It is largely an arid plateau with the Maro Mountains, a range of volcanic peaks rising up to 3,042 meters of topographic prominence, in the center of the region. The region's main towns are Al-Fasher and Nyala. There are 4 main features of its physical geography. The whole eastern half of Darfur is covered with plains and low hills of sandy soils, known as goz, and sandstone hills. In many places the goz is waterless and can only be inhabited where there are water reservoirs or deep boreholes. While dry, goz may also support rich pasture and arable land. To the north the goz is overtaken by the desert sands of the Sahara. A second feature of the wadis, which range from seasonal watercourses that flood only occasionally during the wet season to large wadis that flood for most of the rains and flow from western Darfur hundreds of kilometers west to Lake Chad. Many wadis have pans of alluvium with rich heavy soil that are also difficult to cultivate. Western Darfur is dominated by the third feature, basement rock, sometimes covered with a thin layer of sandy soil. Basement rock is too infertile to be farmed, but provides sporadic forest cover that can be grazed by animals. The fourth and final feature are the Maro Mountains and Daju Hills, volcanic plugs created by a massif that rise up to a peak at Deriba crater where there is a small area of temperate climate, high rainfall and permanent springs of water. Remote sensing has detected the imprint of a vast underground lake under Darfur. The potential water deposits are estimated at 49,500 square kilometers. The lake, during epochs when the region was more humid, would have contained about 2,500 cubic kilometers of water. It may have dried up thousands of years ago. Prehistory. Some conjectures include the area of Darfur as part of the Proto-Afro-Asiatic Heimat in distant prehistoric times, though numerous other theories exclude Darfur. History. Most of the region consists of a semi-arid plain and thus appears unsuitable for developing a large and complex civilization. But the Maro Mountains offer plentiful water, and the Daju people created the first known Western Nile Valley civilization known as Empire of In-Between Rivers, based first at Gadir Mountain in Kurdistan, then relocated to the Maro Mountains in c. 1100 AD in the Maro Mountains, and they left records of valuable rock engravings, circular stone huts at Maro Mountains, greater human excavation at Qadis Mountain as a result of Castafrogi's tragic tale, and they have a list of kings from Gadir in Kurdistan to Ahmad al-Daj in Darfur. The Tunjur replaced the Daju in the 14th century, and the Daju established new headquarters in Abai, Denga, Dar Sila and Mango in the current Chad. The Tunjur sultans intermarried with the Fur, and Sultan Musa Suleiman is considered the founder of the Kira dynasty. Darfur became a great power of the Sahel under the Kira dynasty, expanding its borders as far east as the Atbara River and attracting immigrants from Bornu and Baguirmi. During the mid-18th century, conflict between rival factions racked the country, and external war pitted Darfur against Sennar and Wadi. In 1875, the weakened kingdom was destroyed by the Egyptian ruler set up in Khartoum, largely through the machinations of Seber Rama, a slave trader, who was competing with the Dar over access to ivory in Bahr el Ghazal to the south of Darfur. The Darfuris were restive under Egyptian rule, but were no more predisposed to accept the rule of the self-proclaimed Mahdi, Muhammad Ahmad, when in 1882 his emir of Darfur, who came from the southern Darfur Arab Rizigat tribe led by Sheikh Madiba, defeated the Ottoman forces led by Sultan Pasha in Darfur, when Ahmad's successor, Abdullah ibn Muhammad, himself an Arab of southern Darfur from the Tarisha tribe, demanded that the pastoralist tribes provide soldiers. Several tribes rose up in revolt. Following the overthrow of Abdullah at Omdurman in 1899 by the Anglo-Egyptian forces, the new Anglo-Egyptian government recognized Ali Dinar as the Sultan of Darfur and largely left the Dar to its own affairs except for a nominal, annual tribute. During World War I, the British, concerned that the Sultanate might fall under the influence of the Ottoman Empire, invaded and incorporated Darfur into the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan in 1916. Colonial rule directed financial and administrative resources to the tribes of central Sudan near Khartoum, to the detriment of the outlying regions, such as Darfur. Under Sudanese rule, a pattern of skewed economic development continued after Sudan achieved political independence in 1956. The proxy wars between Sudan, Libya and Chad added an element of political instability. Darfurians, including those identified as Arab and African people, began to respond to the ideology of Arab supremacy propagated by Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi. A famine in the mid-1980s disrupted many societal structures and led to the first significant modern fighting amongst Darfuris. A low-level conflict continued for the next 15 years, with the government co-opting and arming Arab Janjaweed militias against its enemies. The fighting reached a peak in 2003 with the beginning of the Darfur conflict, in which the resistance coalesced into a roughly cohesive rebel movement. Human rights groups and the UN soon came to regard the conflict as one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the world. The insurgency and counter-insurgency have led to 480,000 deaths. Over 2.8 million people have become displaced since 2003, many of whom were children. Many of these refugees have gone into camps where emergency aid has created conditions that, although extremely basic, are better than in the villages, which offer no protection against the various militias that operate in the region. Whilst nearly two-thirds of the population continues to struggle to survive in remote villages, virtually no foreigners visit the region because of the fear of kidnapping, and only some non-governmental organizations continue to provide long-term grassroots assistance, such as Kids for Kids, which, because its projects are implemented by a community-registered organization of village leaders, continues to be able to adopt whole communities and to provide sustainable help which is transforming the lives of countless children. Long-term, as life in the camps deteriorates in the absence of international aid agencies, many displaced people seek to settle in the 70 Kids for Kids villages, which are seen as stronger with basic healthcare for humans and animals and much more. As of 2015 update, the United Nations is in discussion with the government of Sudan over the withdrawal of UNAMID, the peacekeeping force, which is the largest in the world. Its prospective withdrawal and that of other UN agencies which are already working on their exit strategies from the region is likely to impact on the already beleaguered communities. Darfur is listed as a major source of migrants in the Calais jungle. Peace process. Darfur Peace Agreement, also known as Doha Agreement. The government of Sudan and the Sudan Liberation Movement of Minni signed a Darfur Peace Agreement in 2006. Only one rebel group, the Sudan Liberation Movement, subscribed to the agreement. The Justice and Equality Movement rejected it, resulting in a continuation of the conflict. The agreement includes provisions for wealth sharing and power sharing, and established a transitional Darfur Regional Authority to help administer Darfur until a referendum could take place on the future of the region. The leader of the Sudan Liberation Movement, Mini Minawai, was appointed senior assistant to the President of Sudan and chairman of the Transitional Authority in 2007. Doha Peace Forum in December 2010, representatives of the Liberation and Justice Movement, an umbrella organization of 10 rebel groups, formed in February of that year, started a fresh round of talks with the Sudanese government in Doha, Qatar. A new rebel group, the Sudanese Alliance Resistance Forces in Darfur, was formed and the Justice and Equality Movement planned further talks. The talks ended on December 19 without a new peace agreement, but participants agreed on basic principles, including a regional authority and a referendum on autonomy for Darfur. The possibility of a Darfuri vice president was also discussed. In January 2011, the leader of the Liberation and Justice Movement, Dr. Tijani Sese, stated that the movement had accepted the core proposals of the Darfur peace document proposed by the joint mediators in Doha. The proposals included a $300 million compensation package for victims of atrocities in Darfur and special courts to conduct trials of persons accused of human rights violations. Proposals for a new Darfur Regional Authority were also included. This authority would have an executive council of 18 ministers and would remain in place for 5 years. The current 3 Darfur states and state governments would also continue to exist during this period. In February 2011, the Sudanese government rejected the idea of a single region headed by a vice president from the region. On the 29th of January, the leaders of the Liberation and Justice Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement issued a joint statement affirming their commitment to the Doha negotiations and agreement to attend the Doha Forum on the 5th of February. The Sudanese government had not yet agreed to attend the forum on that date and instead favored an internal peace process without the involvement of rebel groups. Later in February, the Sudanese government agreed to return to the Doha Peace Forum with a view to complete a new peace agreement by the end of that month. On the 25th of February, both the Liberation and Justice Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement announced that they had rejected the peace document proposed by the mediators in Doha. The main sticking points were the issues of a Darfuri vice president and compensation for victims. The Sudanese government had not commented on the peace document. At the Doha Peace Forum in June, the joint mediators proposed a new Darfur peace agreement, which would supersede the Abuja Agreement of 2005 and, if signed, would hold preparations for a Darfur status referendum. The proposal included provisions for a Darfuri vice president and an administrative structure that includes both the 3 states and a strategic regional authority, the Darfur Regional Authority, to oversee Darfur as a whole. The new agreement was signed by the government of Sudan and the Liberation and Justice Movement on the 14th of July. The Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement did not sign the new document at that time but had 3 months in which to do so, if they wished. Languages of Sudan include Arabic, Daju, Eringa, Fongoro, Fulb, Fur, Mazalat, Sinyar, Tamazagawa, Midob and Brigid. Government. The region is now divided into 5 federal states: Central Darfur, East Darfur, North Darfur, South Darfur and West Darfur. The Darfur Peace Agreement of 2006 established a transitional Darfur Regional Authority as an interim authority for the region. The agreement stated that a referendum on the status of Darfur should be held no later than 2011. Mini Minawai was the first chair of this authority, holding that office from April 2007 until December 2010, when he was succeeded by Shatai Jafar Abdel Hakam. The peace agreement that was signed in July 2011 saw the Transitional Darfur Regional Authority reconstituted as the Darfur Regional Authority with executive and legislative functions. The current chairperson of the Darfur Regional Authority, Tijani Sese, assumed the post on 20 September 2011. In March 2011, it was proposed that 2 more states be established in the Darfur region: Central Darfur around Zalinge and East Darfur around Eddian. The new states came into being on the 11th of January 2012, when the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir issued a Republican decree appointing their state governors. Demographics and economy. In 2008, Darfur's population was 7.5 million. This in an increase by nearly 6 times from 1973. 52% are aged 16 years or younger. Darfur's budget was $286 million in 2008. Bibliography. Arkell, J. A History of Darfur. Part 2. The Tundra etc. Sudan Notes and Records. 32, 207-238. Daily, M.W. Darfur's Sorrow. A History of Destruction and Genocide. Cambridge 2010. Elise, Haytham. Sudan Under the Constraints of Human Rights Law and Humanitarian Law. The Case of Darfur, in Haytham Elise, Islam and Human Rights, Al-Islam wa Huquq al-Insane, Frankfurt, Berlin, Bern, Brussels, New York, Oxford, Vienna 2010, pp. 193-217, ISBN 978-3-631-57848-3. Elise, Haytham al. Different Approaches to Genocide Trials Under National Jurisdiction on the African Continent. The Rwandan, Ethiopian and Sudanese Cases, in Wrecked in Africa, Cologne 2009, 12/1, pp. 21-67. ISBN 978-3-89645-804-9. Nachtigal, Transil, H. Fisher, Sahara and Sudan, Volume IV, London 1971. Ofahay, S. The Darfur Sultanate. A History, London 2008.